Hello, Douglas.
Hey there.
All right, Mayor, I think we're on.
Okay. I would like to call today's special city council Zoom meeting to order. Today is May the 11th at about 1 p.m. Both the press and the public were duly notified of this meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Again, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are having this virtual meeting that anyone can watch live on YouTube by liking the City of Isle Palms, or go back and watch this meeting at their leisure at a later date. Because of Zoom meetings, we will ask representatives of Dominion Energy to give us discussion of why they have to do what they have to do. And afterwards, I will give each council member an opportunity to ask questions that they have or that they were presented with from our residents. This time, council will be asked questions in reverse order. City Clerk Nicole Deneen, would you do roll call, please?
Councilmember Buchanan.
Here.
Councilmember Ward.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Moy.
Here.
Councilmember Popson.
Here.
Councilmember Bell.
Here.
Councilmember Streetman.
Here.
Councilmember Pounds.
Here.
Mayor Carroll.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Our first and only order of business is discussion of the removal of 97 palm trees on the Isle Palms as part of Dominion Energy's 5-year tree trimming cycle to maintain public safety and system reliability. With us today, we have Bill Turner, Vice President of Electric Operations, Danny Cassis, Vice President, Customer Relations and Renewables, Mark Branham, Forester and Certified Arborist, Clay Chaplin, Forester, Certified Arborist, Paul Fisher, Public Affairs, and Jennifer Hightower, Government Affairs. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor Carroll, and thanks to Council for the invitation to speak with you today. This is Jennifer Hightower. Thank you for introducing my colleagues on the line. And while we don't have a formal presentation for you today, we really wanted this to be an opportunity for y'all to ask us questions about the project. But first, I do want to hand it over to Mark and Clay to let them give you guys some background about the project and explain the necessity of this work moving forward. So with that, Mark and Clay, I will let y'all take it from here, and thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. Hey, this is Mark Branham, Forester with Dominion Energy. Before I get started, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So a little bit of overview of the project. So like Jennifer and Mayor Carroll was saying, we recently completed our 5-year cycle tree trimming project on Isle of Palms. That project consisted of about 18 miles of overhead distribution line trimming on IOP. And after the trimming project was completed, Clay and myself, we do what we call a final inspection, where we go and ride out that 18 miles of line and look for any vegetation conditions that we need to address. And during that inspection, 97 palms were identified for removal at 54 locations. And of course, the palms, they were identified on the final inspection. And once we got the list of palms together, that's when we sent it over to the folks over at Isle of Palms. A little bit of background on these palms. So they've been marked with a white marking paint. It's typically seen on the trunk of the palm. It's a white X. Notifications were mailed out to the affected property owners on April 28th, and our anticipated start date for the removals is Monday, May 18th. And of course, we always get the question, well, why do we have to remove these palms? You know, it's the growth characteristic of a palm tree. It's, you know, they have an upright growth habit. Unfortunately, unlike other trees, they cannot be reduced in height and they cannot be directionally pruned, essentially trained to grow away from a power line. So what we're left with is once they reach a certain height, removal becomes the only option. And Clay, I'll turn it over to you just to give a background on the different, the Cat 1 trees, what we look for, that sort of thing, what you see out in the field, and how do you come about marking a palm tree. So I'll turn it over to you, Clay.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
This is Clay. Yeah, I'm Clay Chaplin. I'm also a forester and arborist over at Dominion Energy. We identify these trees. Typically, they stand out pretty well. They're normally above the neutral wires. And all of the ones that have been identified are what we consider Category 1 trees, where there's no other option other than removal, whether it's because of the actual clearance distance to the wires or the situations. There's no other options other than removals. And they usually stand out because they're either well above that neutral wire, they're touching the neutral, they're displacing wires. They may be really close to the primary wires and burning. They may have been trimmed so much that you can tell, how much. You can't really see it now that it's been trimmed, but you can tell that clearly it was interfering with the height and the amount of vegetation that was removed. And I mean, that's just a quick rundown of, just what we're looking for on those inspections and how we can identify.
Okay.
That's right, Clay. And one thing I would add on there is even the fronds that are maybe not in the primary lines, the high voltage lines, they could be on that neutral. And when you have enough weight and abrasion on that neutral wire, that neutral could end up breaking, fall to the ground, and also cause some voltage issues. So it's not only the primary line, but we also got to take into account that neutral wire below the primary wires.
Thank you. Clay and Mark, just before we get started with the questions, of all the people that you notified, did everybody answer you back?
No, sir.
Half? Maybe half?
No.
I would say less than half. Clay, do you have a better estimate on that?
I know I've spoken to a few, but it's well below half that have actually reached out to us. I mean, there is a small handful that have contacted back, but not a full representation of, that entire list.
All right. Is there anybody else from Dominion Energy who wants to speak before we start our questions? Hearing none. Councilmember Ward.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to meet with us. As you can imagine, this is a major concern to Island residents and people live here. Get right to the hard question. Tell me why the burial of these power lines, these affected power lines, is not possible. Did you hear the question?
Jennifer, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, this is Danny Cassis. Jennifer, you want me to take it?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get off mute fast enough. Danny, I would love for you to take that one. Thank you.
Okay, so fundamentally the lines can be buried, but under the regulatory regime that we work under, those who requested it would have to pay for those costs. In other words, you couldn't make somebody in Allendale, South Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina, or Columbia pay for it. So you guys actually have a non-standard service fund provision in your franchise agreement, and it does allow for the utility to pay up to 50% of any non-standard work, which would include specific undergrounding. So your franchise fee normally runs at 5%, and this is just a off the top of my head number but I think you're generally around 14 million gross revenue. So it's about a $700,000 check that the Isle of Palm gets from us in advance for the rights to operate our system and serve you electricity. So that would be a mechanism that you could use. So the technical feasibility is there. I will say those projects, if you started today, just because of all the technical work required with placement, integration, and conversion, it's likely you could get some of that work done if you specifically identified it, but it wouldn't be done in a reasonable amount of time, say, for instance, to avoid this hurricane season or next hurricane season, or prevent some of that damage that Clay or that Mark referenced when he talked about the trees growing up in the conductor.
Yeah, well, your franchise fees were voted on. Ryan Buchanan would know. What was it, 3 years ago, Ryan? Maybe 4. City Council voted to raise the franchise fees from 3% to 5%, which was a huge increase. Ryan and I didn't vote for that one. So from those increased franchise fees, some people, I'm just telling you what people are saying, they don't see any height in a level of service. And this is a very sensitive issue here. I can imagine you've run into this before, especially after the oak trees. You did the oak trees back in the fall, and everybody was pretty upset about that. And my last question is, why now? Right at the end of or we're in the middle of this pandemic, and people are kind of sensitive to a lot of things, as you can imagine, but the timing is just not too good. You can't hold off on it for a while.
I'll answer. Go ahead, Clay. Go ahead, Mark, and I'll follow.
Yeah, no, I was just saying that, based on the category trees that we're working with here, the ones that are up above the neutral into the primary, I mean, what we have is an immediate risk right now. So reliability issues, and, one of the big one is, a palm tree catching on fire. I'm sure many of you on the island are aware that can happen. And when those embers catch on fire, that ember could fall to the ground. It could actually light the ground on fire, and then you could have a real major issue on a farm. That's the sense of urgency on going ahead and starting that work.
Okay, one last question. I'm sorry to take up so much of your time. You say you do this every 5 years. I've been here right at 35 years, and refresh my memory the last time it was done.
Yes, sir. So the last time was 2014. And this particular project was scheduled in 2019, which in turn rolled over into 2020. So yeah, it's on a 5-year cycle. The last time being 2014.
Okay, well, I've taken up enough of your time. Thank you. I just wish we could bury those lines.
Thank you, Jimmy. Councilmember Streetman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and appreciate the Dominion folks being here. Just a few things here. The list of 97 trees, have you really scrubbed that as effectively as you can? Is that, and when I say scrubbed, I mean determined that every one of those trees needs to come down?
Yes,
Mark,
sir.
Okay.
Yeah, I just took myself off mute. So yeah, all 97 of those trees, being up above the neutral wire, potential to get into the primary, if not already burning in the primary. So yes, those 97 trees do need to come out.
Okay. How often have we seen palm trees actually catch on fire, so to speak. Does that happen?
I don't mean to interrupt, but if I may ask the Dominion Energy team to state their names before they respond. Your names are not showing up on the live stream, and in order to have it on the record correctly, if you all could state your name before answering. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Should I repeat the question? Just how often do you see trees?
Sir.
Yeah. How often do you see them ignite under those circumstances?
We can see them, burning in the primary wires, but as far as an ember falling to the ground and catching on fire, that's not something that happens all the time, but it certainly can happen. And this is Mark Brand speaking. I'm sorry.
Okay, but it is a rare occasion that happens, correct?
Yes, rare, but the potential is definitely there to happen at any time when the fronds or seed heads are in the primary wire.
Okay. What percentage of Isle of Palms now has underground wiring? Oh, it's not a percentage, but I'm exactly approximately how much is underground.
And Jennifer, I'll take that one. Councilman Streetman, this is Bill Turner with Dominion Energy. And we can get you the exact number because we do have it tracked. I'm going to give you an estimate just based on my knowledge of the system. So we've got both ends of the island have some form of underground. We do have some underground around 13th, 14th, say maybe down to 20th in that area. So my estimate is about 20%. And again, we can give you that number in probably excruciating detail, but that's my estimate based on knowledge of the system.
Do you know when all that was put underground? Was that all at one time?
No, it was not all at one time. It was done over time, specific individual projects, and even, some of it was done as part of new construction. Say, for example, in Wild Dunes, some of that was done, as part of new construction. So it just kind of depends. Some of these were, as Danny mentioned, non-standard service fund projects, and others were done over time with development.
Okay. Well, one last comment. I mean, obviously, we all on council get a lot of comments from our neighbors in regards to the tree trimming. Back when the live oaks and other trees are being trimmed, and now the removal of 97 of our iconic trees, hence our name, Isle of Palms, and that just it's kind of like it's one of those things. It's just an additional blow with everything else going on that impacts us in a negative way. Just wish there was some way that we could hold off on this or do something differently. But anyway, I'll turn it over, Mayor, to whoever you have next. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Smith.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'll start, I have several questions, and I'll start with, you mentioned that the last time we had a tree removal was in 2014. How many trees were removed at that time?
I am uncertain of how many removed back in 2014. This is Mark Branham speaking.
A rough estimate? I'm surprised that you guys don't have that figure.
I'm sorry. I don't have that number. I'm sorry.
I'm the reason I ask is I don't believe it registered, in terms of, I wasn't unaware, and I'm not don't remember people discussing it at that point. And so I'm wondering, are you using a more aggressive set of guidelines for which trees you would remove compared to that period, that we would have this big number come around this time?
Hey, this is Mark Branham again. I don't
Yes.
know how many were removed last time, but I do would say that the same criteria was used. You know, once the palm gets above the neutral and there's that risk of the fronds or seed heads to burn in the primary, that would have been the same criteria used. But I don't have the number of trees.
Okay.
Important.
And so what, in terms of, I'd like to know more about what you all can do to help cover the cost of the lost value of these trees. I'll note, I mean, as you mentioned, you receive around $14 million a year in revenue from Isle of Palms. And this is effectively, I would think, the cost of you doing business over here. What can you help us do to cover the cost of replanting?
Hey, Danny.
This is Danny.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, Danny, go.
Yeah, Danny Cassis. So we remit, of course, back to you a percentage, that 5%. So that's about $700,000 that goes presumably into the Isle of Palms general fund. I would say that the way I would look at we're legally and statutorily responsible to operate a reliable system. So, and we pay that fee in advance. If there were some condition where you guys could identify places where you'd like the facilities to be underground, we can start that process, which then could be the path towards the mitigation. But I think it has to come through that franchise fee, and either using the fee and the appropriate match that we have as part of the non-standard service fund. That's likely to be the easiest path. I don't see a remittal beyond or fee in lieu of franchise fee. I would say it's that fee, but our ability to match is based on the use of the non-standard service fund. So I don't know where all 97 trees are, but obviously they're in conflict with the distribution wires, which provide the service level that's necessary for the Isle of Palms. So that to me is a kind of a reasonable point to kind of address that issue.
Okay, so I guess I would say that you are a for-profit company, correct? Although you have a monopoly, you are a for-profit company.
Right, we're an investor-owned utility that's certificated to work in the state of South Carolina. Only in there's a public interest mandate, which is make sure the power is reliable so that you don't disconnect profit with the public interest mandate. The monopoly exists because we're mandated by the state to provide reliable service. Mm-hmm. So that's essentially why the monopoly, the natural monopoly of energy delivery is set up the way it is. It's not to make people a bunch of money. What it's designed to do is to say, hey, this is something that somebody has to do in order to have economic development and have society operate the way it does. Mm-hmm. And so that's the construct behind those two. So they're not like separate and you pull them apart. The monopoly is natural, but it's given to us on a public interest mandate at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am familiar with Dominion, and this is not aimed at you, the employees, but I am, skeptical of your organization based on what I've seen of your environmental track record and kind of a history of passing along unnecessary costs to consumers. But I believe, I would like to see some more on your part in terms of dealing with the fact that we're getting ready to lose 100 trees that are iconic to our city, and that this really is all part of clearing the way for you to provide service that you're obligated to provide. So I would like to see more beyond just pointing to our franchise fee as how we do that. So, and if you have, a response to that.
No, this is Danny Cassis again. No, I appreciate the comments about, wanting to, and I'm reading into your comments that you want to seek a solution. I think to me, the outcome that's probably achievable is ultimately to have some of the facilities placed underground. That would actually leverage our commitment. It's not just predicated on you taking some of those franchise fees. We're also responsible for the match. But
Okay.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable approach. It's not an approach that hasn't been done in other communities all over, really, most of coastal South Carolina.
And if, because we also have a lot of other pressing projects right now, if, it was difficult for us to pursue that avenue, you would not be able to put money towards covering the cost of replanting those trees in locations that wouldn't be causing issues with power lines. Did that make sense?
I think I understood your question was, is there any other path or any other approach?
Mm-hmm.
I think that an approach outside of what I would call the standard approach is a little more complex, but we're having those discussions with folks that want to pursue the non-standard outside of the non-standard service agreement. They're just it's a little more complex because you're in the end of the day, you're essentially saying, I want more investment from the utility, and there's got to be a way to address those costs. So I can't give you it would take actually the whole rest of the session to kind of talk through that, but we're working on that same solution with other municipalities that are interested maybe in not just using the non-standard service fund, but it is a much more complex and nuanced approach. But we're certainly not against that. And actually, you've got, you're as close as your neighbor, Sullivan's Island, looking at also some a much more robust solution. So to me, that would be the answer. Unfortunately, we can't do a full workshop right now under the COVID-19 conditions, but that's certainly something that I'm not sure it's reasonable to think we could address it now with the risk of the trees. But I think it's absolutely an opportunity before we hit the next cycle for sure.
And just to be clear, it sounds like you're talking about underground power lines. If I wasn't clear, is there an alternative for you to provide replacement funding for trees lost if we don't, for replanting of trees, if we don't pursue an underground power line situation?
I think we'd have to look at what the impacts are. Those trees can, technically they could be replanted. Actually, they could be, the work could be done, the conditions could be made safe. And, if the city wanted to pursue replanting in other locations other than the power lines, then that's a constructive way to approach it. I can't commit to it today. I'd have to look at it with you.
Okay.
To see where you'd want to replace. I mean, the biggest thing is we have absolutely no desire to damage the Isle of Palms and something that they identify with, and it's beautiful vegetation. Our only thing is we just have to make it safe,
right.
And we can't take that risk that's associated with something happening, whether it be someone decides they want to prune the tree themselves. Mm-hmm. Someone mentioned the fact that, how many times have they seen an ember that then catches on fire? We've already seen it in the city of Charleston, but I would tell you the risk of an ember falling on the ground and catching on fire there's a much higher percentage of that happening than a global pandemic is the way I would describe it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And maybe there's some leads that we could pursue together and looking at a better solution. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And Danny, let me add on to your comments. This is Bill Turner with Dominion Energy, and Mark, I might need your help on this, but we have identified 97 palms here that we consider to be a Cat 1. There are more than just these 97. So these trees will come up either in the next cycle, or if they happen to become an issue between now and the next cycle, we will have to address them as well. So it's not just 97. Mark, did you categorize the others, or did you list the others, Cat 2 or Cat 3 trees as well, or did you only list the Cat 1s?
Hey, this is Mark Branham. Bill, we only listed the Cat 1. So like you said, there are, I don't have a number, but I'll just say a ton. There are a lot of trees on the island that are, on the right of way, but they just haven't reached a point where they're an issue right now. So we were just marking the Cat 1s, the immediate issue palms.
So Bill Turner again. So just to kind of give you information, this will be an ongoing issue, and I know, as many of you know, it depends on the species of tree that we have. Some are very low growing, some are in the mid-range category, and some palms grow extremely tall. So it depends on their growth rate as in terms of when we have to address them, either within or on our cycle or within the cycle. So planning and looking at underground projects, non-standard service fund projects, as Danny mentioned, is an important part of it. I know that you guys have, as you mentioned, many priorities, and this is just one of those to add to the list. But addressing it as we go is a very effective way of dealing with any type of vegetation or things of this nature that would impact a distribution line, either overhead or underground, for that matter.
Just to follow up then, based on what you were just saying, I think it would be very beneficial to our council to have more information, both about the last few cycles, how many trees you've removed, and then looking forward, what you would anticipate in terms of tree removal in the next few cycles. I think that would help us if we were to seriously consider placing lines underground. That would be important to our decision making. Thank you.
That's a great point. Bill Turner with Dominion one more time. So we have done a similar type thing with Sullivan's Island. We will be certainly willing to come and do a presentation at a future council meeting to talk about aspects of underground and some of the issues that go along with that, and help guide you and let you guide us in terms of where we go with the non-standard service fund projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Pounds.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Dominion folks, for joining us. And Danny, this question is probably for you, and just a baseline education for me. This non-standard service arrangement, is that in place of a franchise fee arrangement? Am I understanding that right?
No, I'll give up. So let me give you just a brief narrative of how it works. So we collect that franchise fee from the residents. It's on their actual bill. It's a percentage. Yep. And then in advance, we actually remit back to the Isle of Palms that fee that we've collected. And then the way the non-standard is I would describe it as it's just a provision within the franchise. And then the way it works is that the town can essentially, by making their investment or declaring that they're going to make their investment on the underground, we're required actually to match it dollar for dollar. And the total leverage, so for instance, if it's $700,000, I think that's about the rough number on an annual basis You'll check me with your financial records, but we literally allow the town to carry 5 years of obligation. So you would be talking about the ability over a 5-year period I'll make it real simple on an annual basis. If you said we're investing of that 700,000, I think it's 50 basis points, or maybe it's 1/10 of that, so it's $70,000 or $80,000. We'd be responsible for at least matching that. Now you can, so that's over $100,000, maybe $200,000 worth of match that we'd be required, but you can leverage it over a 5-year period. So you've got a decent amount of resource where we'd be responsible for the investment as long as you provided your share of the investment. And I'm glad to put together a simple spreadsheet. We usually do it for most municipalities that express a strong interest. And then we would, you can show what kind of leverage you've got, and it really gives you an idea of how much money can be utilized from the utility, as well as how much can be used from the franchise fees that are collected already.
Got it. Yeah, I think that would be helpful. It would for me anyway, to see, just some numbers around what that would feel and look like. And then, Danny, is there grant money out there available for municipalities to use to apply to these costs?
Yeah, so the short answer is that in some cases, the folks that have actually leveraged the non-standard service fund, they've used other sources for their, it doesn't have to be the franchise fees, those fees themselves. There are examples of other entities pursuing other sources. The best example that I know of is Coleman Boulevard in Mount Pleasant. Some of that work, all the work was done through their non-standard service, but I don't think all the money came from their franchise fee. They used other grant money and other sources to essentially create the match. So that's that's an honorable and good approach. So I think yes. The short answer is yeah, they are. There are other ways to pursue. And again, I'm not an expert on the granting process, but if those were ways you could actually leverage additional dollars, then that would be an appropriate way to use them.
Yeah. And Mayor, one last question. Sorry. I heard you say IOP is roughly 20% underground now, which kind of surprises me that it's that low. But so given what's left, whether it's 80, 70, 50, whatever the number is, any swag for what it would cost to underground the rest of the island in total cost, not whose share is what, but just from a total cost standpoint?
I'll give I guess part of an answer, and then I think Bill can probably speak even maybe a little more in depth. It would be it would be a significant undertaking, and I think this is part of the process, which is to define where the public interest is broadly met. Most folks think of major thoroughfares where there's a lot of pedestrian and maybe even auto traffic, and think of those as the places they want to do it. I will completely agree that it's ultimately an expensive proposition. So I think you have to be selective, and I might even say I'm not even sure you want everything to be underground as much as you want some of it. I've learned through the 30 years of operating electric systems that underground it's got its benefits. It certainly creates the avoidance of conflicts with trees. On the other hand, it is a matter of fact, we had the outage on the Isle of Palms maybe about 2 weeks ago. Yep. That was done. That outage was because underground we had a switchgear that was essentially flooded. So underground for flood events are really bad, and they take longer to essentially fix. Overhead respond better in terms of restoration, but they're subject to wind loading damage too. So there's kind of a trade-off. I would stress that I'm not sure all undergrounding is the answer, but I would say that strategic undergrounding is probably a really appropriate way to look at the answer, whether it's tree mitigation or whether it's aesthetic improvement in some areas. Think of it as strategic, and that way, and come up with and we'll work with you on this. Come up with a plan that I think creates prioritization, and I think that actually makes for for ultimately a program that works in everybody's best interest.
Okay.
Mayor, if I may,
Yes, ma'am. Of course you may.
just to answer part of Councilmember Pound's question. The last time we requested an assessment from, back then it was SCE&G, on undergrounding utility lines, the estimates that we received between, to underground the lines between Breach Inlet and 11th was roughly $12 million. And to underground the lines between 11th and 21st Avenue was $6 million. And these are 2016 numbers. I think it would serve us well if we got an estimate, updated estimates from Dominion Energy currently.
Hey, Desiree, could you go through those again just one more time?
So the first phase was Palm Boulevard between Breach Inlet and 11th through 11th Avenue. That was 12 million.
Okay.
And then between 11th to 21st Avenue, that was $6 million.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. All right, Mayor, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Popson.
Just going to kind of follow up on two earlier council members. Obviously, you have a cost per tree removal, cutting down the palm, removing the stump and carrying off the debris. And I think I'm just wondering if there's a way, again, to repeat, is there a way to find a way to use that same kind of money, whatever that cost is per tree, to working with the local landscaper to relocate some of these instead of just cutting them down? Obviously, there's a survivability by transplanting them. It's probably not the easiest process. Survivability might be 50-50, but at least it's better than zero. So really, I just would hope that we could think about this and try to work together on transplanting some of these trees versus just getting rid of them. And then my second point is I agree that the answer is to go underground. And there's got to be a way to start the discussion of at least maybe phasing to go underground. Hartnett Boulevard, I believe, was done about 5 to 8 years ago. And I don't remember too many issues. SC&G did it. They also spoke to somebody that they were talking about doing other streets once they got done with Hartnett, but that never happened. And obviously, if it went underground, it would save you all the money of when the storms come, and obviously cutting down the trees and the palms and the trimming. So I just wish we could somehow start discussions about going underground. I'd be happy to volunteer my time to meet with somebody to at least start trying to move this forward. And last point is just to argue a little bit overhead versus underground. All new neighborhoods that are being built and everything being built is going underground. I don't see anybody doing poles anymore. So there's got to be a benefit more so for underground. So that's just my comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Kevin. Councilmember Moy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, everyone from Dominion Energy. We appreciate you being here, certainly, and we appreciate anything that you can do to kind of collaborate and work with us. And certainly that sounds like the tone this meeting so far, and we're grateful for that spirit of collegiality and trying to get creative in how we resolve this together. Because ultimately, we all want the residents to be happy. We all want as many palm trees out there as possible, I think. So I'll echo what Councilmember Smith already said, that we need to see the data. It certainly seems like what we're seeing now is significantly greater than what we saw in 2014. And if that is the case, we should have a good explanation as to why, and if we can expect some sort of trend because of something that's happening with the environment or climate, or if there's something else that's happening. I think we need to understand that. No need to respond to that right now, but just to echo those comments. My first question is, I'd like some greater clarity on the definition of what a category 1 is. I understand it's above the neutral and it's positioned to get into the primary, but can you give us some more specifics in terms of proximity? Are we talking it's within a certain number of inches or feet, or can you help us define that? Because I'll be honest with you, my parents have 1 or 2 trees that have been X'd, and when I look at them, I think to myself, that doesn't really seem that close to me.
Hey, Clay, do you want to just kind of review the different criteria on the Cat 1 and Cat 2s?
Sure. The Cat 1s, they pose an imminent threat. I mean, it's the Cat 2s, that's still a problem, but they're not as imminent as the Cat 1s. Cat 1s.
Can you define imminent?
Imminent could be, I mean, they pose a threat now.
I understand. I understand that it means it poses a threat. How do you determine if something poses an imminent threat? That's my question.
I mean, if it's already within contact with the neutral, it's already a threat.
Does that mean it's within an inch? Does that mean it's within a foot? What does that mean?
And the majority of these Cat 1s are above that neutral, or already at their contact with the facilities that are out there.
I understand that. I don't know if I'm not asking my question clearly. Are you saying that it's above the neutral and it's touching it? Is that it, or does it have to be within a certain diameter? Because there's trees all over the island that are higher than the neutral line, but they're obviously not flagged because they're not close enough to the line.
I mean, every tree is a little different as to their location. A lot of the trees that have been marked have been trimmed on. So a lot of the vegetation that was in contact is no longer in contact. And that's a lot of times for the guys, they don't feel comfortable working around the other trees with the palms in contact with the wires.
So it sounds like it's a somewhat subjective call as to what falls under category 1. Is that right?
I would
Cat 1,
Mark Branham.
Okay.
Clay, I would just say that there's varying heights of Cat 1. So you might have some that are actually in the primary now, could be burning. You might have some that, during a growing season, a seed head could come out of the palm and get into the primary. But overall, a Cat 1, what I call the cabbage head or the stalk, is up above the neutral, and it's getting into proximity of that primary line that could cause us issues. So the difference is a Cat 2, the cabbage head being below the neutral wire, it's still an issue. And like Bill was saying earlier, it's going to be an ongoing issue with palms on the island over the course of the years. But the Cat 2s are at a point on the right of way now where they're not an immediate issue, whereas the Cat 1 has that potential right now.
Yeah,
So
I guess I understand the height. That's very clear and very black and white. It's easy to understand. What I'm having trouble in, I think what the city is owed, the residents as well as the city and this council, is a clear definition of what determines if something is a Cat 1. Because if it's merely the height, I'm telling you, there's a tree in my backyard that is much higher than the neutral. It's obviously not a threat because it's nowhere near a line. Is the definition merely that it's within striking distance, or that it's within a certain number radius? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. This is Mark Branham again. A lot of it is just the potential for that frond to get into the primary. So in other words, the Cat 2s don't have that potential right now. Where a Cat 1, whether it's immediately right now burning in the primary or whether it's several months from now, the Cat 1 has that immediate threat to the line that we need to address now. So it's varying heights. We don't have a specific, like say a foot away from the primary. It's not measured by a specific measurement. It's, you know, really case by case on what could be a threat to that primary wire.
Okay, so it's a subjective based on the arborist, and I'm not trying to demean or belittle, because I understand you've gone through years of training, and I'm not trying to get you to pass years of training in the span of 30 seconds. But I think you're answering the question that there's a subjective call made on the part of the arborist to determine if it's an imminent threat or not.
And it's back to the growth structure of a palm tree. And, you know, like we said, there's a lot of Cat 2s out there that we don't have marked that are going to be an issue at some point. But the Cat 1s, they are up above that neutral where they could cause a threat right now.
But that determination of whether or not they can cause a threat is based on the arborist's subjective opinion. Can I just get a yes or no on that?
I would say that's just based on where and like Clay was saying earlier, a lot of these fronds have been pruned back because of how close they were when Lewis tree initially came through. So after we, you know, trimmed the fronds back, some of that might be kind of hard to see right now. But if they're up above the neutral within feet of the primary, that was a decision to mark it as a Cat 1.
So yes. I'll move on. Can you describe right now, as Dominion Energy is planning to proceed, the removal process that you have sort of approved already?
I'm sorry, could you ask that again?
Sure. Can you describe the removal process that is anticipated? I guess we're a week away, so I assume the crews already know what they're supposed to be doing. Can you describe that process to me?
Yes, sir. So the notifications went out to the property owners on April 28th, and the work is set to begin next Monday, May 18th. And I guess everybody's familiar with the notification. So basically explaining this is our routine 5-year cycle trimming project. It talks about the number of palms identified at the address. It says that they were marked with white marking paint, and it kind of gave a overall start and concluding date. But Lewis Tree, what they'll do is they'll go through this list, and of course all the trees are marked with a white X. So when they get there, they will remove the tree, cut the tree flush to the ground, chip up what they can, and haul off all the big wood from the trunk of the tree. So everything will be cleaned up, and we'll just work our way through this list.
What's done with the stumps?
They're just cut flush to the ground. The stumps remain intact in the ground. We just cut them flush to the ground.
Okay, and how long? So the property owner is responsible for taking care of any stumps that are left.
That's right.
Does that not strike you as incomplete in terms of removal of a tree?
That's just the standard process that we use everywhere on our system.
Okay.
We just don't do stump removals like that.
Okay. I'll move on then. I'll make a comment and echo. I've just got my notes here, so I'm going in order. So forgive me if it's a little all over the place. I'd like to echo what Councilmember Popson said in terms of understanding the ROI of buried lines versus overhead lines. From the cost of merely all the presentations that you have to do to Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms alone. You've got 6 or 7 people coming to do each presentation. I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek joking a little bit here, but the cost of trimming, the cost of additional outages, those, I don't know, I assume folks in your organization have done analyses and understand the impact, the economic impact of having overhead versus buried lines. But I would suggest that there's probably some great break-even economics for you to invest significantly more than the 70,000 that you spoke of, you mentioned earlier, which is really not going to get close to the many tens of millions of dollars that we're going to need to do the island. So the 70,000 is nice, but it's really a drop in the bucket. And furthermore, when you talk about the franchise fees, it's a pass-through cost for you. So it's not additional cost that you're taking on. The residents of the Isle of Palms are taking that on. So the arguments that you're making that, well, your franchise agreement should pay for that. Well, sure, but that's really taxes that our island residents are paying. That's why Councilmember Ward and Councilmember Buchanan didn't vote for it the first time, because that's what it was. So, I would say maybe the argument or the conversation should not be around how much of this small portion of the franchise fee are we using towards burying our lines, but rather what are you doing to help us? And I'm not saying that you foot the entire bill, but is there anything you can point to where you've helped apply or sought federal grants? Is there anything you can point to where you've helped us mitigate this challenge kind of a little bit more proactively than the presentation a week before removal of 97 trees is set to occur?
Danny, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill, and I'll follow you.
Okay. Councilman Moy, so I'm not sure if this gets directly to your question, but I think it's, maybe to look at it from the standpoint of we are investing in our system in terms of reliability, and also, looking at it from an underground perspective. But we do have a second feed now that comes into the substation on Isle of Palms, which is right behind the town hall building. And that was a conscious decision that we made along with the town to work toward, and I think that was an outstanding joint project that we did to get a second high voltage feed into the substation. So, and that came in completely underground. It does rise up right there near one of the public works buildings, and then drops in overhead to the substation. So, I think it's those types of joint projects where we can work together. And like Desiree mentioned earlier, looking at it from a Palm Boulevard perspective and dividing those projects up. And once we hone in on exactly what your priorities are, as Danny mentioned also, then we can start to figure out if there are other funding sources, because it may make sense for us in our longer range projects that we have, our planning projects that look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. We may be able to take some of those dollars that we were going to invest back into the overhead system and perhaps put them in the underground system at another location. So it's like Danny said, if we can get a longer approach here, a longer planning horizon, and make sure that the folks that are helping us, and when I say us, I mean me and my organization in operations, but we have a planning group that helps point us toward what do we need to be doing way out into the future, 20 and 30 and 40 years down the road. If we can make sure that we're aligned with you, with council, and where you're wanting to go, I think there are options out there to assist more so than just with the franchise fee. And tell me if that did or did not answer your question.
I think that answers my question, and I appreciate that, and I can acknowledge that you could get some help from the city in terms of that long-term view, and I think this council is taking steps towards giving you that. So yes, that does answer my question. I would throw it back to you to say, what are some things you can do with this current situation, these current 100 trees, to kind of put your money where your mouth is a little bit and show us that you're willing to work with us and help us address the concerns that we have as a council and the concerns that our residents have.
Right. And again, Bill Turner with Dominion, I do understand that. As Mark has indicated, I mean, these are current threats to our system as it stands right now. So we do have to take some immediate action now to remove the threats. And granted, we've got 97 on the list. We've got others, a little bit further downstream that we're going to be looking at. And we will certainly have additional discussions with you all, as we have done with Sullivan's Island, to try to figure out how do we approach this as we go forward during this cycle and other cycles as they become taller and present greater threats to the reliability of the system.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Buchanan.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks folks from Dominion for joining us. What I find interesting is the fact that I've been in council for a while, and there we go. I've been in council for a while, and this is probably one of the most progressive tree trimming findings that we've had in a while. And I'm not sure if it's because it's the transition from SCE&G to Dominion and the way things work and the policies are different. But we've never heard really, Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3 trimmings, even as far back as 2014 and the last time we had an inspection. But moving forward, we definitely need to work on our undergrounding. And I think, Danny, and good to hear from you. It's been a while. I've burned your ear on this a number of times when you were at SCE&G, trying to get a lot of these wires underground. But the hard pill to swallow was, well, even like from Breach Inlet to 21st was nearly a $20 million project, and trying to save for that. I think moving forward, we just need to go ahead and, as I tried to do previously when the franchise fee got raised from 3% to 5%, let's take that additional 2% and put it into a sinking fund to save money to put towards undergrounding. And that may be an approach that council needs to take. Is, let's find a way that we can work with the franchise fees that we're receiving and put it into a sinking fund that we can work and have some capital that we can move forward and put these infrastructures underground. As for that, and I have brought this up to Desiree before, and Danny, this is kind of for you as well, is if we're not able to utilize all those funds, I would like to see where Dominion would allow us, and I'm not sure who the policyholder is with this, it's instead of using those funds for undergrounding, like I said, is to use those funds for additional plantings. And I think that's kind of what's been brought up before, is there other ways that we can use that non-standard service for additional plantings or other sources instead of just undergrounding.
Ron, yeah. So so the way that fund is set up, the provision would be that it would be the utility would be required to put assets in service, if you will. So it can't be done straight for just tree replacement. So it would need to be done in conjunction with specific undergrounding. I want to say though, you actually, I think what you were expressing is, and I think I've heard this expressed a couple of times, is that the Isle of Palms is interested in a bigger and bolder and more aggressive plan. I cannot argue with the councilman who said the $700,000 that annually is remitted, that's a pass-through. That's right. That money is it's collected and it's passed through. I think if we got in front of each other and got a really kind of, look, here's where we want to go, here's what we want to do, instead of thinking of it as a $12 million or $6 million deal, say, okay, look, here's what we can commit to, and here's how we would do it. And then to Bill's point, if we're investing with you, exclusive of the non-standard service match, but there may be some ways to offset investment that we would have to make anyway, that could be utilized as potential credits. I'll spend a ton of time talking to you about regulatory environment and ROIs. We can do that. The biggest thing I think we need help from IOP is, look, we really want to move forward. Here's our goals. Here's multiple step process, but here's the most important place for us to move forward. Let's create that framework. And then I think that then provides you with the emphasis to address the funding. It would be done. We'd do it mutually. We'll show you what it costs to do it. But I don't think anybody's ever done an undergrounding project. We've probably done $50 million worth of these projects, but they always start with a kind of a vision or a plan of, hey, this is how much we need to do. And then moving forward from there, you break it up into smaller pieces with a recognition of not only utilizing the non-standard, but are there other ways? I've worked with other municipalities, Beaufort being an example, where they wanted to do something a little bigger and bolder, and they were committed to do it, and they did it, and passed on costs for that for a wider range of population that didn't see the original benefit. But I think that's a possibility here too. I think if you take it as a big, bold everything, then I think it's doomed almost to failure just because of the enormity of that. But if you said, hey, look, from point to point, and then of that, we want to go A, B, C, D, and E, I think you got a better chance of people understanding the benefit, especially if it can be done in a place where there's what I would describe as public interest, places that people pass all the time, and not necessarily in their yard, but in their in proximity, but also on major thoroughfares. Those are the things I think can get traction. So I was trying to address several really good points that were made by other folks too, in addition to Ryan, to your point. But in the end of the day, I think it will take both of us kind of rolling up our sleeves to address what I think really is a longer term issue.
No, I agree. Obviously you can tell that this council is really willing to work and try to come to some type of resolve towards that. And hopefully, post-COVID, we'll be able to sit down in a room and hammer this thing out. I'm done, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Ryan. Councilmember Bell.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit different angle and hopefully pretty quick. So at the end of the day, it's always money and accounting. So I'm sitting here listening. There's an operating budget, presumably annual, for mitigating future disasters. And that's operating expense. So if this were $20 million over 10 years, you'd have $2 million a year shared by the city. At 50%, it'd be $1 million a year over 10 years as capital expense. And it just feels like Dominion's approach, and I've been in the shoes where I've had to manage budgets have been handed down to me, is to treat everything as an operating expense. So you have a category that says I have X amount of money to spend every year to mitigate future problems, whether it's an ember falling or some other problem. We live with future problems, storm seasons. I would just suggest that if we're going to have a collaborative effort, that we start looking at this as investment opportunity, and that's capital expense. If you keep coming at this on an annual basis every 5 years or whatever to solve problems out of an operating budget, you're not going to get there. And, we've had a lot of budget discussions around future capital expenditures and over what period of time. If there's any opportunity to go back to your management and look at it and treat it as an investment opportunity now in underground utilities, then I think there is a way between, our ways and means and your finance people to come up with a solution. These quick fix, and I'm not aiming this at those of you from Dominion, I appreciate you being here, but short notice, take down a lot of trees, not replace the trees, no strategy behind it except for a mitigation strategy. When we're still sitting here about 4 months in front of a heavy storm season, the mitigation effort should be permanent. It shouldn't be done on an annualized basis, on an operating expense basis. And Mayor, that really is all I've got to say. I do want to thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Randy. If y'all don't mind, it's my turn. This is Jimmy Carroll, Mayor Carroll. Number one, please don't take me wrong when I say this, but I do think you're taking the cheap route out. Leaving those stumps in the ground is an insult. It's an insult to all the people who live there. I think I heard Councilmember Ward say he's been here for 30 years. He doesn't really remember something like this. I've been here over 60 years, and I remember trees being trimmed, but I don't remember palm trees being taken down. I remember when SE&G and Dominion were negotiating, and they were talking about $1,000 rebate, and that kind of went to the wayside. That we were going to lower the cost for 1,000 kilowatt hours from 125.34 to 124.91. So every time I turned around, it was a lower amount of money. The first thing, if we could do, is take out these stumps for these neighbors who are adjacent to these trees. I remember in 2014 when SE&G put 5 miles of underground cable from Porsche's Bluff across to Isle Palms. I mean, that was an incredible job. And you know, it talked about years ago, undergrounding was much more expensive, but nowadays it's a lot cheaper. Not cheaper than overhead, but it's a lot cheaper to put it underground. And it saves us in the long run when it comes to storms. So I would like for us to get together and think about the future and creating a fund that we can start finding our primary lines to put underground, then the secondary lines to be put underground. But in the meantime, please, for the houses, the 97 trees that you're taking out, pull out the stumps at least. Who wants to tackle that one? I don't blame you.
Mr. Mayor, it's Bill Turner. We will certainly look at that and address your request. I think, you know, one thing we do have to look at there is because of typically where these are located, we are going to have to make sure that we've got nothing else underground that we might damage with that. And sometimes we can create a little more damage than normal if you do go in and grind something up like that. But we will certainly take that as a direct request and get you an answer back. What I would like to do is ask Mark and Clay to look at it from that perspective, because we typically don't do that, as they mentioned. And, you know, it's for a variety of reasons. Some of them have to do with damage to other underground utilities. But we will certainly take that as a direct request and get you an answer.
I would be great. Our residents would be greatly appreciative of that. I know one house has 14 trees coming out of its front yard.
Right, it does. And, you know, again, I mean, I know that, you know, I mean, again, and Danny mentioned this earlier, but we're dealing with a situation where we are removing trees that are in the name of the municipality here. And we understand the sensitivity of that. We also know that we have a great responsibility to provide safe, reliable, and efficient energy to all customers. And I know that you guys, all of you on council, represent everybody, and everybody's situation is a little bit different, you know, in terms of their economic situation, their health, everything else involved there, and their priorities are all over the place, as you well know, and we certainly see that on a daily basis, and we try to take that into consideration. And, you know, that also, all of those factors go into placing facilities overhead to underground. And, you know, I'll just tell you just very briefly that, you know, our experience is not everybody necessarily wants facilities to go from overhead to underground. They don't, sometimes they just don't really care about that. You know, you might think that everybody would be 100% for it, but they aren't necessarily that way, because it does depend on how it impacts them, because we may need, for example, to place facilities on their property for the better overall good of the project. So that's why we have to take these things, one project at a time, even one property at a time, one property owner at a time. So we see that, and we'd like to relate some of those experiences to you so that you can help point us in the right direction as to where we go next. But we will take your request and get you an answer to it.
I greatly appreciate that, and again, once this is over, let's please get together when we can do it in person and have a public forum where residents can sit out there and listen to us talk about it. I see Council Member Smith holding her hand up. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for being here to help walk us through and answer our questions. Kevin, Councilmember Popson had discussed looking at what can be done for transplanting, and I'm concerned that it sounds like we're still moving ahead on the same schedule of starting removal within a week or two, I think. And I believe from what I've read in local media that you all have delayed plans with other municipalities so that you could look at some of these issues. And I'd like to see if there's, given that we have questions on the table about transplanting, and I still haven't gotten a clear answer on whether you can help cover the cost of that or the loss of value of the tree. I believe that based on some information from our city administrator that the replacement cost for a new palm tree is $300. So we're looking at a loss of $300,000 in value at a minimum. I would like to see this removal schedule delayed so that we can get more answers and so that we can have more discussion about this.
I just, back of the napkin math, $300 per tree times 97, that would be 29,100. If my math is right.
Okay, I'm sorry. Bad math on my part.
You're right, but yeah, I mean, look, in the short term, we're absolutely committed to make things safe. Okay, we're not. This is the hardest part about our job is that we need to. We can't leave what we know are potential. I think we don't think it's actually. There's much subjectivity into grade one, category ones. And I think that arborists who are the experts who've seen those types of situations, they've seen, that's why they classify them the way they do. So, yeah, I'm like those who, especially the mayor, have already expressed, we'd much prefer to do this in person and in the public domain with you guys to show you, I think, the possibilities. I think it's probably in everybody's best interest for us to remove, but I don't think I'm not saying this is a selfish, greedy corporation. I'm saying let's make it safe, but I think we would much prefer to then work on a constructive approach that provides for either replacement, doesn't create a conflict with wires, however you guys want to work it. I just don't want to get stuck with somebody getting hurt or the power goes out for long periods of time, or somebody's house burns down because an ember falls on the front of the lawn, and then we're all sitting here talking about what happened. I'd rather make it safe. That's my preference. I know that's a responsibility that we have. I know it's not popular, but I also recognize you guys want something that I think with constructive conversation we can kind of figure out the path to get there. I'm concerned about if we don't do anything immediately with the schedule, then there's a bunch of category one trees out there that I view as a risk. And not just, you could say, well, Cassis, all you care about is it's risk to your company. No, it's risk to all of us, I think, is that I'm concerned about. Because I know we can plant another tree for $30,000, we can plant them all, right? So I'm just wondering, I'm weighing risk and reward. I don't know that, I think there's much more risk that I'd rather just address. But I'll come every day of the week if you want me to Isle of Palms once COVID-19's over, and spend as much time as you want to try to figure out how to constructively address replacement and undergrounding if it's necessary.
Councilmember Streetman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick note here, and I'm sure the arborists, Mark and Clay, probably know this since they're arborists, but I'm just looking at palm trees, and basically, Mayor, this goes to your statement about removing the stumps, but palm trees have a root initiation zone, and they grow roots from only that location that they're located at, and it's just located underneath the soil line. So as a result of that, palm roots are easy to dig out. So it's a relatively simple process to remove a palm tree stump. So I just want to go on record as saying that based on what I'm reading here anyway. So, I mean, it looks like I'm going to have some palm trees removed, certainly, because of the issues here. So it doesn't look like it would be difficult to remove those. Thank you.
Councilmember Popson.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback that. Leaving the stumps to me is unreasonable, and throwing the cost to our residents is, or the cities, unacceptable. And you can get a stump grinder in there, and those palm tree stumps, you could tear through that in no time, and you don't have to go deep. And the roots are a fiber source; they'll disintegrate away. So taking these stumps out is not that big of a deal. And I think it needs to be done.
Our planning director, Douglas, I had to take out 7 trees in my yard, and I had to sign a document saying I'd put those trees back. But it was rather easy taking those trees out with the stumps up in the air. You cut them off at the ground level, then it becomes a lot harder to take them out. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. So I apologize for my bad math earlier. I think it's worth noting, though, that just the replacement value might be $30,000, but the true value of losing those trees is exponential. And also, I'm still not hearing, you're saying you'll come back and work with us. I'm not expecting that we delay this project by 6 months, but I feel like we could afford a few weeks for further discussion of even potential transplanting before you move forward. So,
anyone else from council want to speak? I would like to say one more thing to Dominion. While you've only had a very small turnout from the residents you sent letters to, I would please ask you to reach out, whether it goes to the door, and leave something on the door, as opposed to them coming home one day and finding a hole in the ground.
Or a stump.
Or a stump. No, I think they're going to work with the stumps. They're going to try to. I heard.
And yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is Bill Turner. So just make sure that I'm clear. So we have notified by mail, but you do want us to notify ahead of time. Is that what you're saying, by a door hanger prior to removal of the trees? Is that your request?
Bill, it really is. The people, I did talk to several people that are affected, and they were actually pleased to have talked to you. I think if somebody's not spoken to in advance, I think they're going to be really upset, as opposed to coming home and finding a hole in the ground.
Okay. All right. Well, we will certainly do that, and we will endeavor to try to get to the right person. I can guarantee you're probably going to get a call, and we're going to get a call at some point, right? Here, because somebody's not going to be happy. I can assure you. And unfortunately, I mean, that's part of our job. And So, you know, I mean, we're going to approach it from a safety and a reliability standpoint. And we are relying on our experts, being Mark Branham and Clay Chaplin, to help us here and determine the best course of action, along with the folks here on council, to give us guidance as to how we go about this process. And I know it's not something that everybody's going to be happy with, and you all make these decisions on every time you meet, and believe me, we completely understand that. We appreciate what you do to keep the city of Isle of Palms running in a similar type fashion to the way that we try to run our business as well. So we will endeavor to do that, to notify them in addition to the letter, as well as removal of the stump.
And again, if we could, after this pandemic is over, hopefully it'll be over, we can all get together and try to work on a future plan to underground certain lines throughout the Isle of Palms.
Yes, sir. I mean, we are committed to that, as we have mentioned on the call here again. Bill Turner with Dominion, and we'll certainly work with you as we have our others in close proximity to you, as well as throughout our service territory. And I mean, you've got really good ideas. I mean, as always, the folks that are on council, have I mean, their minds are open to any and everything that's going on in their own business, as well as in the business of the city, and we appreciate the guidance that they give to the community, as well as to us as well.
Desiree, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Mayor. I think all of the questions that you all presented covered a lot of my concerns as well. We will follow up with the Dominion Energy team to confirm their commitment for the removal of the stumps.
Thank you.
And an additional notification to the residents, and also some of the information that was requested related to the past cycles and the anticipated impact of the following cycle. So we'll work with them on behalf of council and provide all that information over to you all.
Bill, we appreciate you being with Councilmember Moy.
Sorry, if I may have just one more question. I think Councilmember Smith had a question that I had as well, which is, I still don't feel like we've got an answer as to whether or not these trees can be transplanted. And so we've got 100 trees here. Is cutting them down the only option, and if so, why?
And Councilman Moy, this is Bill Turner. I'm going to work on that for you right now. I might need Mark. I'm probably going to need you and probably Clay to help me with this. And so let me just give you just a little bit of brief background here. So in some of these cases, it may not be possible to actually do a relocate. I mean, the tree may have to be taken down in sections because of where it's located in close proximity to either the neutral and or the primary. So, depending on where the fronds are located, the cabbage head, that sort of thing. If we damage that cabbage head in any way, I mean, that tree is going to die. It's not going to live at another transplanted location. So we do have to be very careful. And I know that Mark and Clay have looked at that when we did our analysis on Sullivan's Island, for example. And we even, they had to consult with several of our operating supervisors in order to make that decision of whether it was a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 tree. I do appreciate your comments before on, how do you determine, how do you know, in these particular cases. And sometimes it's a matter of which way the tree is bending, whether it's going straight up or it's got some type of lean to it. The soil where it's actually planted, a lot of those things go into the determination. But Mark, can you help from that perspective, from a relocate standpoint? Because I know you and or Clay have looked at all of these trees in detail So can you help us from a relocate standpoint?
That's right. Make sure I'm off mute here. Hey, this is Mark Branham. Yeah, Bill, just like on Sullivan's Island, so the Cat 1 trees on Sullivan's Island, the relocates were not possible just based on the height and proximity to our overhead conductors. So it's really the Cat 2s that we need to look at doing relocates. In this case, on Isle of Palm, doing those relocates in the future before the next trimming cycle. But the Cat 1s, based on how close they are to the primary lines, it's just, you can't safely do it, you know, without extensive outages on the island, disrupting power for outages to be able to safely relocate the palm just because of the proximity to the conductors.
So, you know, and it's Bill Turner again. So, I mean, what Mark is describing is, you know, in the process of digging it and then actually lifting it up, you obviously you're going upwards toward the primary conductor. Now, the neutral conductor, or the lower one of ours, which in most cases is about 6 feet below the primary or the energized conductors, that's not an energized conductor. It is grounded, but it also is potentially it is a current carrying conductor. And so, you know, and that's why when you know, we look at it from an abrasion standpoint and a movement standpoint. So if that tree is moving or swaying, like in a storm or a hurricane back and forth and pushing on the neutral, and it breaks it and it comes to the ground, it's not going to arc and spark and create a big, you know, bluish green arc and then cause a big power outage. But it's coming to the ground. It's just going to sit there. And if somebody grabs it or touches it, you're not going to be hurt by the potential or the voltage in that conductor, but you are going to be impacted by the current flow that goes between you and ground, which you're usually standing on or touching in terms of a fence or something like that. So that is the concern there. And especially when we actually are lifting the tree, then we're moving it, you know, upwards. And there are cases where, and it's usually limited, where we can de-energize the electric primary up top, but that usually means that we, you know, customers are going to be impacted, our system's going to be impacted, and there are cases where it's just not possible to de-energize that for the amount of time that it's going to take to remove that tree and transplant it somewhere else. So we tried to take these things into consideration as we've looked at it from a Cat 1 perspective, and boil it down, which is exactly the same thing we did on Sullivan's Island, exactly the same, to determine, you know, which ones we're dealing with. And we used the same process that we did with Sullivan's. If you remember that, Mark, I think that number was about 300. And then we worked it down with their guidance, and we got it into classifications in terms of categories of trees and which ones were the worst and the closest to our facilities, and the ones that we thought potentially were going to do the most damage and be the most, from a safety standpoint, be the highest priorities. So I hope that helps, and we're here for additional questions if you have them about these situations.
Thank Councilmember Smith.
So are you saying that you're going to look at the feasibility of transplanting these trees if possible?
Well, Councilman Smith, we have, Councilwoman Smith, I'm sorry, and I mean, we believe that is the only option in this case.
Okay, that's disappointing, but thank you.
Listen, I do understand exactly where you're coming from, and you know, we knew what your concerns were going to be. We tried to address that and put that into this process that we did to get to this number of trees.
All right, thank you for that.
Well, we appreciate you trying to leave the least amount of impact for these neighbors who have the trees being taken out of their right-of-ways in front of them. And we look forward to working with y'all in the future so we can try to work on a program to underline certain lines and Washingtonian trees. I know they grow 4 or 5 times faster than the rest. This probably get people not to plant those too often.
Yeah, and actually, Mr. Mayor, it's Bill Turner. That is an outstanding point because they grow unbelievably tall and they grow at a much faster rate. So as you have described, not every palm tree is the same. And if we can, our kind of one of our mottos that we have from a tree standpoint is right tree, right place. And that couldn't be more important than right here. So we can, the bottom line is we can coexist. We just need to make sure, and maybe there's a, there's an effort here that we can do in terms of education to make sure that the right tree is, if a tree is going back in this location, that the right tree is going back at this same location so that it does not become an issue in the future.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Hearing that, do I hear a motion to adjourn? Gentlemen, thank you all for coming from, and ladies from Dominion Energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Ryan?
Thank you.
Yep, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all.